Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Trauma Uncensored. My name is Andres Gamboa, and this is episode 10, which, by the way, Brooke, I don't know if you know this, but out of 4 million podcasts out there, only about 700, and I think this is a high end, but you might have to, somebody Google and tell me if this is right, but I want to say like 720,000 of them only make it, only just literally those few make it to episode 10. And very, very few make it past episode 20.
Oh, we're going all the way.
Oh, we're doing it. Now,
we're going all the way.
Congratulations. You're now in the top 25% or something like that.
Hey, you know what? Listen, I'm in the top 25% of everything.
That's right. Hopefully not everything. There's some things you want to be in the lower percentage.
Okay, that's fair. Well, then, we'll just say 25%. Higher for the good things, and we're in the low 25% for the things
bad
I
things.
don't want to be involved in. How's that?
Yeah. Like people who, like, I don't want to be in the top 25% for people who have like stinky farts or something.
No, those statistics or those rankings go to the other people that I live with in this household.
Yes.
I mean, you know, you would think your husband is enough, but when your 14-year-old like outperforms your husband,
Wow.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's a stinky place in here sometimes.
Love it. Speaking of something that was really stinky, the trial.
That was very stinky.
You like the transition?
I do. That was fantastic. I'm trying to visually connect at this point the word stinky with my
trial.
Experiences of the trial.
We just put it lightly. But before we get started, we do want to read and give a shout out to some of the 5-star reviews that we've started getting. So by the time we're recording this, episode 10, the reason we're just now starting to do this is because it is now post-launch date. So this is also the first episode that we've recorded after launch. And I wanted to take a quick minute in this episode to thank everyone who has supported the show and has, left us a review, taken time to either message me or Brooke individually. Some of you we know, some of you we haven't heard from or had known in a previous chapter of our lives. And so just to see the feedback come in, that's been really, really positive and that it's impactful. It's honoring. And I want to say thank you for that. I don't know if you want to give a quick shout out to some of the...
Yeah, no, I don't want to name any names until I get full approval. But it has been, we launched on Logan's birthday, and just the feedback there were people who were telling me they blew through, well, I don't mean blew through, but they got through all 5. They listened to all 5 back to back, and I'm going, holy Moses, how were you able to sustain, that amount of in one sitting? But some of the heartfelt, I got a video from someone that just left me, it's hard to describe. The words are really hard to describe. I was very grateful because I had been questioning all of this, am I doing the right thing? Is it going to do anything? Are people actually going to want to listen or hear? Because this is my account of things so far, right?
It's public.
And it is. It's very public.
It's not like a friend that you're telling over dinner who, you'll see him again and you're talking to everybody's listening now.
Yep. Well, but that's the thing is I've told so much of this to so many people anyway, that it doesn't feel like I'm doing anything different, because we've been doing this and sharing our story for, almost 9 years now. And it's of course grown and morphed and changed. And, but for people to reach out and say that they feel like they can breathe or that they've been heard for the first time. Or, I had someone reach out to me this morning and talk about how, the episode that launched this morning talks about, trauma and how everybody deals with their own trauma. And, I could sit here and say, well, I've got this trauma, but I'm not going to compare to your trauma because your trauma is just as valid. Someone sent me a message early this morning and said, thank you so much because, this is what happened, in my life. And I said, but, you honor your trauma. Don't let anybody tell you that your trauma doesn't rank or doesn't exist, because their trauma, they believe, is bigger, and that's just not how it works. And so it's been very humbling, I should say, to get the feedback. So I'm grateful to hear it, and definitely continue to message us. We love all the feedback. You can email hello@traumauncensored.com. You can also email me directly at brooke@traumauncensored.com if you want to do that. And we're available through Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. So we're around.
If you haven't followed us there yet, please do so to support the show. If you're trying to figure out of non-monetary ways to support the show, just give us a follow, and sharing the news is pretty much how it'd be the best, ideally. A lot of people have also asked, hey, what we can, there's people asking for like merch. we on my end, I don't know if you got any of that as well. People are like, do you have like shirts and stuff? And I'm like, oh,
yes, it's coming. So I do. Yep. I do have shirts. 2 designs available, but I am in the process of setting up that shop. So stay tuned. Hopefully by the time people hear this, it will already be out, and then we can direct people toward.
And just for people, just because we like to be transparent, so we record these way ahead of time. So this is, as of like when recording this is June 9th. And then we record every Monday, but we're like 4 or 5 episodes ahead. Yeah, because episode 6 dropped today. So we're 4 episodes ahead. So by the time you hear this, we don't know. It might be that we already have a whole bunch of stuff going out. I will say one last thing for as far as like where you can get more information and stuff is the newsletter that's also linked at the bottom of the show notes, or on all of the social media channels that you'll find for Trauma Uncensored is you can opt into things you want to hear about. It'll ask you like which ones you want to hear about. It's not, we do it the opposite. We're not going to just assume you opted in for everything. We'll just let you choose what you want to opt in. But the main thing that we want to have people know that comes out of that newsletter is when episodes drop. So in case you forget that it's Monday and you missed this week's episode, you'll get an email that say Monday going, oh, by the way, here's the new episode. Here's kind of what it's about. Go check it out. And then tell everybody you know. That's it. If you love it, tell everyone. If you don't like it, then don't tell anybody.
Yeah, then just don't tell anyone. Please, no negative feedback.
Now today, last week last recording we set up. Well, we finished, or we didn't finish, but we were halfway talking through the trial, which I guess I should have thought in hindsight now that it was going to take multiple episodes to cover that, because that was such a long stint of the fallout from the crash. And so today we're going to do part 2. Now, again, before we get started, really quick shout out to Carolina14, who left us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and it says, real and raw and everything this world needs. I listen with my boys and we're left craving more. Brooke's voice is soothing yet firm, and you're left wanting more. I love you guys, and we're here for you all. That is such cool language to be using. Thank you for spreading some love. Appreciate it. Carolina 14. We'll be reading one of these out every week.
It's Carolina 14.
Oh, is it
I believe.
Carolina?
So, yeah, Carolina. But yeah.
I didn't know
so
that.
Carolina is actually the one who I talked about early on in the podcast. I believe that's her that's leaving it. She gave me serious, the one who took us in after the crash.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's a special one.
It
I didn't even know. I didn't even know.
Yeah, it is. Her and her boys, I mean, played with the kids when we lived in Florida, before Logan's passing. And it's so cute because the youngest, Gabe, and Mallory, they're the same age and we're in the same class. And
that's right.
We lived together, with them for a time. And I know Carolina is hoping that someday, even though they aren't together now, they aren't together in what's the word I'm looking for? Man, it's a Monday morning. In location, they aren't near in location. She's hoping that maybe someday their paths will cross again, and they'll get married. And I hope I'm sorry, Gabe, whenever you listen to this, for embarrassing you. Mallory won't listen to it, but I know Gabe will. So love to all of you.
Shout out to all of you. Okay, so let's jump back in. These part 2 episodes are always kind of hard to get into, just because you kind of, it's a different flow, but that's okay. We'll get into some of the statistics of distracted driving again, where it makes sense for the trial period. But just to kind of recap a little bit, and again, this is going to be a different flow than what you guys heard last week, so sorry about that. It's a new week. Things have changed. Logan's birthday. Logan's turned 18, so things are new and it feels different around here now that the podcast is out. Doesn't it a little bit?
It does.
So just a quick recap in case you missed last week's episode. The crash happens. It's a really weird juxtaposition because even from day one after the crash, in fact, a day of the crash, you didn't even know that you're in a cot right next to the guy that just killed your son at the hospital. Some of the details about the injuries and the extent of the injuries that happened to you, to Jordan, to your daughter, aren't released until you're sitting down in court across from this guy. There's a point where he tried to do a plea deal where he only gets 2 years of probation and some community service.
It was a year in prison. A year of jail time and 2 years probation out of 30 years that he stood to serve.
Yeah, so nothing essentially. A slap on the wrist by
and
all
a slap
regards.
in the face to us.
Yeah,
horrible slap in the face.
By the way, shout out to my wife for bringing me coffee mid episode recording.
I know. I keep waiting for my cup of coffee, but
she makes a good cup of coffee.
Hey, Bree.
Yeah. Can you get down now to Nashville?
Come to Nashville. Come stay with me and make my coffee.
Yeah, she's amazing. So we're going through this, and in the middle of this isn't something that happens overnight. This takes literally the better part of a decade. I mean, it's been 9 years almost since that happened, and it literally took till about a year and a half ago.
It was June. I'm sorry. The trial was at the end of April of 23 and sentencing was the middle of June 15th.
So we're 2 years ago. So 7 of the 9 years since the crash, you spent dealing with reliving this trauma in all sorts of different ways in the public eye. Let's just jump back right in there, because we kind of started going last time. We talked a little bit about more of the emotional and the mental behind, like how you were feeling and what you were thinking as this is going. But let's talk a little bit more about how specifically it all broke down. It took years before he even got arrested. It wasn't until much later. They kept appealing and appealing and appealing. And
not
all
appealing.
Of a sudden,
they kept going to. They were pretrial hearings. So he did appeal after the fact. In fact, that was last November. So only his appellate hearing was only what's November? November, we're in June. So 7 months ago?
Yeah.
So that was the appeal. Yeah. Oh yeah. 7 months ago.
This is, oh my God. This is
never ending.
It's like crazy.
It's in theory, it's over officially, but my trauma, my guardedness, my experience tells me to consistently be on guard for something else to pop up. Like the appellate hearing, was the said and done, even though it took months before we got an answer. We didn't get an answer immediately. So we had to sit and wait. And, this is, a year and a half after the trial, and we're sitting around waiting again to see what that ultimate decision is going to be, if he's going to be let go or if he's going to be denied his appeal. But yeah, that was just last November. So
I didn't realize that was the appeal. I see. I have all this. By the way, we're not lawyers or counselors, so my jargon as far as like appealing and all that stuff is wrong. So I apologize.
No, that's fine. I mean, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. And honestly, I could put a disclaimer out too that so much has happened that I'm reliving and retelling all of these things to the best of my memory, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm 100% accurate. But I mean, there's a lot to the story. So I think it's kind of hard to remember 100% of the factual details as they are, but they're close. If they're not correct, they're very close. For sure. So we were going through pre-trial. So I think it was like every month they were meeting in meeting in court to, kind of be like, well, here's the new information and here's what we're going to do and here's what we need, and working our way to, well, not, I mean, I say working our way, it wasn't us, because Jordan and I never went to a pretrial hearing. We only got the information in the aftermath because we were living in Indiana at the time. So pretrial monthly for years and years.
Now, there was a civil case as well, right?
There was.
And okay, so talk to me a little bit about that and the difference between that and what you guys were doing as far as the criminal side of it.
I need to walk a fine line with the civil.
Okay.
But I will say that was 2 years. That was 2 years of a fight that was, I don't think traumatic's even the word. So the civil case started almost immediately after the crash. And then we didn't wrap that up until the fall of 2018. So it was 2 years that we were battling that. So, that was October. I think it was October because we were on fall break. We were actually at the San Diego Zoo when we got the call that it was finally, over. And the actual criminal trial came to light. He was arrested in February of 2018. So there was a lot of overlap there too. But yeah. Just the civil case in and of itself was so exhausting and so traumatic that I have noticed times where all of that has played into the future events for me. Like I can, in retrospect, I can go back and, it's just hard you have to really work on trust after something like that. And that takes a tremendous amount of work to get your brain aligned with your body there, because you can, do all the work and recognize it as it's, happening in the now, if you've done the work or if I've done the work, but my body doesn't necessarily always isn't caught up to the rational mind. And, the body definitely remembers and the body keeps the score. And the only good part about it now is that if the body is reacting, if it's remembering, if it's reliving, then I have enough tools now where if I'm really, really anxious, I know what's going on versus I sit there and I'm like, what the fuck? What is going on? I think I'm dying. And how do I fix this? How do I fight it? And now I don't fight it. I do what, self-care has become huge. I just back away and I sit with it and, do all of that. But, that whole civil case really fucked me up. A lot. And Jordan too. We still fall back into making certain decisions based on what we experienced. Decisions, trust, all sorts of things from just that experience. And it wasn't just the experience with lawyers and the other party involved. It was also people who were close to us that we lost relationships from because of it. It's very hard for us to trust close people because of things that happened throughout that whole situation. So it wasn't just, this civil case with these two parties that are going against each other. It was also people on the outside who we trusted and loved. And, it just never, there's certain things, people show their true colors in certain situations. And that was one of them where we learned from, but we still have a hard time, even though we know what happened, we understand certain things. It's still very hard for us to trust.
No, that makes sense. And and it's true. Because it's so, especially so early on, right? There's this like dramatic juxtaposition, right? Where it seems like it's a movie. There's grief, and some people listening to this are grieving because of a loss, right? Specifically, something terrible, a son, a father, right? In such a violent way. And then you're dealing with that grief. You're dealing I say that word lightly, but just because that's just the layman term, but you're trying to figure out what the fuck is happening to your brain. Mm-hmm. This grief is happening, right? Mm-hmm. And then also you have a guy who means well, whatever, your lawyer, oh, by the way, all of this other shit, which is stressful on its own. Any civil case is, or any court case in general, going to court is a stressful situation. Not just because of the stress of the outcome and like what happens if this doesn't happen, but on top of that, it's also just logistical. You're trying to figure out, you're constantly checking your phone. Every time it buzzes and it's your lawyer's name, it's going to be crazy news. It's like dealing with that alone would be stressful. So then you layer that on top of the grief, and then on top of it all, you're now also experiencing moments, because it takes years, right? So now you're experiencing moments of, wow, this is the first June 2nd without Logan, right? Or this is the first time that you get to see your birthday without your son, or this is the first time that it's the anniversary of the crash. Oh, here we go.
I know. Camera. I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix it.
No, you're good.
Oh, there it is. Okay, yeah. We're back.
And so like you're living through all of this.
Well,
on top of all that, and your friends are also kind of all over the place. The people that you wanted to count on.
Yeah, it was a thing. It's
so wow.
Well,
it's just
but
so
I do
brutal.
have to say that Joe, our attorney, worked his ass off for us. He was amazing.
That's right.
He never pushed us. He was, him and his family, his wife Lucy, even his kids, they were during that whole process and even beyond. Joe testified in the criminal case, and considering, I'll tell it to you this way. Sitting through a civil case for 2 years is awful, because people will come to you and say, I can't put an amount on your son's life. And then they turn around and they do, and it's a big fucking slap in the face. And then you're like,
no amount of money sounds right.
No, but especially when it's laughable, and they're just trying to, just wipe their hands of it from the get-go. And you're like, well, fuck you. Do you know what you did? You hired this man, and this man was driving for you, and you knew better, because he had 2 DUI priors. He was on a business-only driver's license, which means he was only supposed to be driving from his house to his work, right? Not all over the state of Florida. And also, you encouraged him to work in the car. And not only that, but you pulled his company vehicle prior because of his previous DUIs. So you knew he wasn't a safe driver. So what the fuck is he on the road for? You know, and you're making him work too. And he was doing all sorts of personal and work things in the car while he was driving that day. And then you want to come to me and be like, we can't put a price on your son's life, but here you go. And you're going, no. And so Jordan and I we fought. And Joe, the whole time, our attorney Joe, he was phenomenal. And he put up with a lot from us, because we were sitting there going, holy shit, when is this ever going to end? It went through appeals. It, for something, I think it might have been for allowing the cell phone use into that case. I believe Jordan would remember better than I would, but there was something that, went to the appellate court. But I was waking up in the morning with just full of anxiety and, sending Joe messages going, when is this over? When are we going to hear, when? And so what him and Lucy lived, through just by dealing with us was commendable. But on the other hand too, I noticed, if I am to be completely transparent, I'm going to say that my grief has only just truly come to the surface in the past year, because Logan dies and we're in the hospital, but immediately we're thrust into this civil case. So it kept us distracted. And then we're we moved back home to Indiana. And I mean, in those 2 years, we were in limbo too. We were in complete limbo. We were living with my mom and trying to figure out what the next stages of life were. And so, yeah, we were doing grief work, but we're in complete limbo, but we're distracted. We're in limbo, yet we're distracted. And we started the nonprofit, and that kept us distracted. And we were doing all of this stuff, media spots and talking in front of, schools, and we were in front of legislation, fighting for new laws, and it just continued to keep us going. And then the criminal case on top of that, we were just waiting and waiting. So even though we were doing the grief work, I mean, I've got the tools, or I've always had the tools and the understanding, but I don't think I was actually able to really grieve until all of this was over, which makes sense why in December of 2023, 6 months after sentencing, my ass ended up back at Milestones. I ended up in another crisis mode. I thought, because you walk away from all of it and you're like, oh, I can breathe and it's over. But when you've pushed it all back, unknowingly pushed it all back and pushed it down because you've kept distracted and kept going all of this time, it was still waiting right there for me. So I feel like I've only just begun dealing with the actual grief component of it, but I'm in a better spot to do so. Yeah. Because I've done so much work.
It makes me think of this, and I'm not trying to simplify grief, but the way it makes me think of it is kind of as if you were in a nice little cozy cocoon, maybe in a nice warm bed, beautiful, comfy bed, cozy blankets. And then all of a sudden you get dumped into the middle of
a shitstorm,
the coldest shitstorm ocean you've ever seen, which is the crash. And then you kind of come back up for air. You take a deep breath, and then, you're still in the middle of the ocean, right? But now the trial and all this stuff that you're doing is just your way of trying to just get back to shore. You can see the shore; it's there, but it's like a mile away or whatever. You're like, and you're just trying to and then the trial's over, and that's you reaching the shore. So now you're out of the water in a way, but all of a sudden you're still on the fucking beach, cold as shit, like no blankets or nothing. And now it's like, okay, cool, warm up now. And this is the first time you actually get a chance to go, oh, okay, like I can go find fire, I can go find heat somewhere. But you're still having to get through the woods and stuff. You're like in the middle of nowhere. It's not like there's like a little cabin right there, cozy. Going, hey, welcome back.
No, because going to find the fire and going to find the coziness and going to find the cabin was something that I had to choose. Like when I went into the crisis component in December of 23, like I missed out on Christmas with my family. I missed out on my birthday, which is January 1st, which is something we always, do. We always have this big thing to do in the evening. And then on my birthday, they always come up with fun plans for me. And I was at Milestones for that. The thing was, though, is that in November, I started to recognize, like just out of the blue, I started to decline, and I started to recognize, oh shit, I know this place. I've been here before, and people were telling me, you don't need to go back to Milestones. You've got this covered, you've got the tools, but it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I knew enough, I was like, guys, I got to go back. And I did an intensive, trauma intensive. And my therapist and I were like, yeah, it's time to go back. But so I land on this beach, right? And I'm there for about 6 months, 5-6 months. And I'm searching and I'm getting my footing again. But then this wave comes of all of my past that hasn't been fully worked through, and just drenches me and kind of takes me right back out into the water. And from there, I'm like, well, shit, now I've got to make my way back to the beach again. And that's where, but because that end wave came and got me, and I knew enough to go do work for myself, that's where the finality of all of the criminal stuff, like when the appellate hearing came last November, I was able to regulate and walk through it without going into crisis, without going into breakdown, which for me told me that I had finally figured some shit out, and that, you know, I could handle reliving this trauma, because every time a court thing would happen, or we go to trial, or an appellate hearing comes up, I literally relive that day and then more, because like at the trial, we found out more information than we had ever been told or been privy to. And then in the appellate hearing, it was the same thing. Although, you know, not only are we sitting here watching a man who is trying to get his sentence revoked and go back home, but for the first time in all of those years, we also had access to Logan's autopsy report, which we had never seen before. We knew bits and pieces on how he died and what happened, but the full autopsy report was listed in that appellate document that we had been sent. And I mean, I read through it, and, you know, as a former smoker, I actually began smoking again right after that.
Holy shit.
Yeah. You know, but that was, instead of me breaking down, I turned back to cigarettes. Not currently anymore, but that tends to be I had a friend tell me the other day she'd punch me for the cigs. Melanie. But I mean, it's one of those things that, you know, I could have turned to X, Y, and Z. I could have had another breakdown. For me, that's just how I handled the stress, but I was able to handle it without having to go back to milestones, without having to do another trauma intensive, because of all of the work that I had done. But it took that wave again after the trial. And even though it took 6 months, it took that wave for me to recognize that it was time to paddle my way, claw my way, do whatever I needed to do to get back to that shore. And then once I got through that, and then they recognized the extreme OCD, which again was, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but, you know, I've had OCD all my life, but it was manageable. Trauma made it completely unmanageable, but I didn't know that for 10 years. I didn't know that. And so when I was back at Milestones for my last tour, you know, and they recognized it, they ended up they encouraged me to go to a program here in Nashville. And I did 3 months in that program and, you know, became medicated for it. I used to be very anti-medication, but I trusted the people in the Rogers program enough to gradually work my way into it. And since they got me on the appropriate dose for OCD, and after doing that program for 3 months, which was phenomenal, now I can say I'm on the beach building the fire. You know, I can see the cabin. The cabin's right next to me that I go in and out of. So many metaphors today,
but it's so cold as shit outside.
It always will be, right? I mean, but see, that's the thing, is I don't look at it as being cold outside anymore. I see it being seasonal, right? There are times where it's cold, but then there are times where it's pleasant and I want to sit out there. So it's just a matter of learning how to deal with it and walk with it and live with those circumstances being part of my life, and not letting them make every single day frigid.
Oh, this is really well said. I think that there's a couple of questions I wanted to ask you too about the trial, but I didn't know that you didn't see the autopsy report until the appellate hearing, which is, wow, that's so intense.
The 911 call was so I'd never heard the 911 call until the trial, and then, you know, had to listen to it like 10 times, my 911 call. And then, we knew just enough to know that Logan didn't feel anything. He was just here 1 second and gone the next, which for a bereaved mother is actually very comforting to know that he didn't suffer.
Yeah.
So I at least knew that much. But in terms of the damage that was done to him in the crash, I didn't know, 95% of what I read. And that's rough, because that's my kid,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's the child that I can't imagine,
So I gotta tell you, so we were in Nashville, right? Which is funny because I specifically only went to Nashville just to see Brooke only, and then she leaves town.
I did. I left. He was here the entire time that I was gone. That's not true.
I went to visit my brother, and I saw some other friends there too. Again, shout out Danielle.
Hey, Danielle.
But first of all, I was shocked at how terrible the drivers are in Nashville, and I mean, mother of God.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to Nashville.
The blinkers are suggestions, man. What's up with people driving over there? It was so bad. I saw 3 car accidents, one every time, and I hope there were only accidents and not car crashes. But I was thinking about all of this, and it was launch week, so obviously it was right on my mind. And I wanted to tell you a really touching story. I just thought about you quite a bit, obviously, besides the fact that we were launching the podcast, but trust me, I promise it comes back full circle. So soccer. Okay. So the Champions League final was 2 days before we launched. I'm going to choke up to telling this story maybe. Okay. So
here, I'm here to hold the space. Do it. I may cry too.
I thought of you because there was soccer Champions League final. It's the club final. Google it. And back in 2015, my favorite team, FC Barcelona, what up, won, and it was amazing. And the coach had his 9-year-old daughter out on the field, and she had the Barcelona flag. And the final took place in Berlin. They beat a team from Italy, and it was awesome. And so she planted the flag on the pitch. And then the coach, he was the top of the game. He won everything there is to win that year. And then the next year, he didn't come back. And everybody was like, what the hell? What's going on? And so he announced for the first time that his daughter had been diagnosed with a severe and aggressive form of cancer, and she died.
Oh, no.
And she was 9 years old. So, I mean, all the connections, right? Like, Logan was 9. We're approaching his birthday. We're approaching this launch. A father loses a daughter in a equally traumatic, but just differently traumatic. Like, just any loss of a child is intense, but his wasn't, a car crash. It was cancer, and which is also like, I mean, my God, sad.
I mean, listen, I know what it's like to lose a child in a heartbeat. I can't imagine. I can't even begin to fathom watching it and what he went through.
And so I bring this all up because she was 9. She died in 2016. Again, more parallels, right? Because 2015 was the final, 2016. And we're just talking about this. We're talking about you, my brother, my cousin, who's, for all intents and purposes, I call him my brother as well. We're just talking about losing a child because, everybody's talking about this guy. The reason that they're bringing him up is because he came back to coaching, and he was now coaching the team that was going to be playing in the final that weekend.
Wow.
And so he had, he had gone through a bunch of trauma. He also had talked about healing and all this, and they asked him, they said, hey, when you think of your daughter, like, what is it? And he said, it took a lot for me to get to this point. And so I'm thinking about him going through the ocean and the beach and all this whole analogy. And he kind of said what you just said, which is why I thought of this. He said, I could easily think about how unfair, about how regrettable, how demoralizing all of this is, but she wouldn't want that for me. And more than anything, I just have now learned to approach it with gratitude because I did have her for 9 years, and I was able to live 9 wonderful years with her. My favorite memory was when she planted the Barcelona flag in the middle of the pitch back in the Champions League final in 2015 when we won it all. And I have this immense memory of her just laughing, and that's how I remember her. And she might not be here physically, but I believe she's with me spiritually. And I know that because I feel her presence, and I can see it in the people that I meet every day and who have shown so much love and affection for my family. And, so us as parents now, right? We weren't parents then when we're fans of this team. Now we're parents, and we're just thinking about you as well. Cause I was talking to them about, hey, my client has this podcast and it's coming out, and it's really intense. And, it's the first episode's about this car crash, and her son's life was taken. And we're just, the theme is there all weekend. And so the coach, his team, of course, they win. And the fans, there's like 60,000 fans in this stadium, and they bring out this giant banner that covers one entire side of the stadium. From top to bottom, all the bleachers, just this giant banner, all the fans brought. It's just this flag. And it's a cartoon picture of him and his daughter, and the team he's coaching now is Paris, and it's her planting a flag of Paris in Munich. And we watched this, not a dry eye in the entire stadium, and the room. Like, we had a bunch of group of people watching it. We were all like, oh my God. Like, it was just so touching. And it just gave me so much more appreciation and respect for you, even though I already have a ton because of everything that we've talked through. But people like you who experience something so heavy, people like him who experience something so intense. And I remember thinking, what are the odds that all of this is happening on the weekend that we, like days leading into this, right? By Monday when we launch, that image of the banner is all over social media. I mean, it just kept reminding me of what we were doing and how much you have endured and how much Jordan has endured and Mallory, because you guys have had to carry this entire weight. And I just wanted to say that I'm just honored and I'm so proud.
You.
And so, yeah, I wanted to share that because I knew this is the first time we were recording since then. But I just hats off to you, and just I hope that people listening can find the same inspiration, because it was very emotional. And Monday when we released, I was feeling really just, I don't know if elated is the right word, but I was feeling like something was right, something big was happening, and it felt like we were doing something.
We
right.
are.
And so,
I mean, I truly believe that we are, and that's the thing, As a society, we are made to feel guilty if we continue to, or if we try to find joy or purpose after a death like that. And, so many times I find, and I was this way for a long time, doing anything that brought me joy, I felt extreme guilt. I couldn't find the gratitude and that's why that therapy session at Milestones during my first tour with Tara on Logan's Angel Date was so important, because Tara taught me how to view Logan as who he was, instead of, who he was in life, instead of who he was on the side, what I saw on the side of the road that day, and the carnage and everything. And, I was telling you that story this morning about someone who I feel is still, very stuck in their grief. And I partially feel like they think that if they work on it and allow themselves to walk alongside the grief versus walk within the grief, that they're going to dishonor the child that was lost. And and oh my God, what are people going to think of me if I do this with my life? And that's why I think this has been so important. Jordan and I talk about our story all the time, and it's not just to create awareness, but it's also to show people that, we've been through some serious shit. It is honestly a miracle in my eyes that I'm still alive today. But then part of it's like, it's not a miracle, because I feel like I've listened to how I've been guided and jumped from one healing component to the next. And it's all, and it'll be a continuous process anyway, but I hate the society puts so much pressure on people to feel guilty if they do something, find joy in their lives again, if they find the beach. It really, because, we have a hard enough time dealing with that ourselves, but then, we take a trip and Logan's not there, and oh my gosh, we're actually laughing and having fun, and how dare us find purpose after that? Aren't we supposed to live the rest of our lives in this hole of grief and be miserable and just kind of wither away? Well, no, we're not, and to hear the story of that coach is very heartwarming for me, because there are people who can walk alongside that which they have been given and never ignore it, not shove it down, not pretend like it didn't exist or that it doesn't matter, but learn how to heal themselves in a way that they can go back to doing what they love or find the purpose. And I mean, I truly feel, it's hard for me to say here, only because this is what society wants me to say, that I am grateful for, and please don't take this the wrong way, anybody that I say this, but I am grateful for the experience that we've had. Because I am grateful that I got 9 years with Logan and all of the memories. In fact, remind me here in a minute, I've got something to add to your soccer story, which is, I am just smiling from the inside and out with all of that. And I'll share that here in a second, but I am grateful for, those 9 years that I got with him. I went to grad school with him as just a baby, and I tell people I wouldn't have survived grad school without Logan because he was my grounding point. Watching him when we went to Disney or him just be goofy, and watching him play soccer, which is what I'm going to tell you about here in a minute. I get those memories, and those don't go away because they happened. I'm not grateful that I don't get to do the should haves and everything in life without Logan. See, here I am going to cry now. I'm not grateful that I get to miss out on that. I will always grieve his life and what I wish I had still with him and wish what he got to experience. But on the other hand, the person who I am today wouldn't be that person without what has happened. Logan is teaching me and guiding me and making me into someone. I was miserable before his death. Jordan and I were on the brink of divorce before his death. I was just so unhappy, and it doesn't mean that he died and I'm like, hey, I'm happy, let's live life. No, it's taken a lot of dark times and a lot of work. But if I look in the mirror at who I am today compared to who I was a decade ago, I am so much more enlightened and grateful and joyful, and I carpe diem the shit out of life. I live for today. I no longer live for decades down the line. But I also believe Logan has been guiding me, those Logan winks, the little breadcrumbs, to doing something. Like, he wasn't meant to live a long time, but he was meant to create some sort of legacy. And I feel like I'm doing that for him. I'm putting all of this out here. Just in the feedback that I've gotten in a week from the podcast, right? But I'm grateful for who I've become. I'm grateful for who I am now, what I've learned, what I've been through, even though it's been hell. But I'm also grateful for where we ended up in Tennessee. I'm grateful for Mila, who we wouldn't have had otherwise. So when a society tells you, no, you have to grieve, you have to be in mourning for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
That is a misnomer, because it doesn't have to be like that. And, when people are reaching out to me now going, well, grief is forever. Well, okay, you can mourn, but don't live by it. Don't let it define you. It is okay for you to do this for yourself. And you know what? I've learned that self-care is the best way to do it. I'm leaving in a couple of weeks and going out to Arizona for the first time in my life. Should have done this a long time ago. But for the first time, I'm going out on a solo trip to reset myself, to refill my cup, right? To have those moments meditating and thinking about Logan and doing the work. When we went to Mexico for the New Year last year to a resort that was a wellness resort. They had a lot of yoga, a lot of breath work, a lot of bowls and meditations. And I was sitting in a forgiveness meditation the first day we were there. And that meditation changed the course of where I'm going. And I think that's kind of, because of that, is kind of where I have been able to look at doing this, because I was sitting in that forgiveness meditation. And remember how I told you before, the work that I did at Milestones the first time allowed me to see that scene where the 2024 Brooke, or 2016, or the 2016 Brooke is standing there looking at her dead son on the side of the road, who's blue and jiggly and just, I mean, no life. And then in 2022, when I go to Milestones, Tara allowed me to see myself, see that scene as 2022 Brooke standing behind 2016 Brooke, and could see Logan in his light form instead of on the side of the road, right? So that's what I took from that and been walking alongside. But then you get to the end of 2024 Brooke, who's sitting in this meditation the first day she's there, and it's a few days before the new year. But something called me and I said, you know what? I really need to go do this, forgiveness meditation. And Jordan goes, you have mentioned it so many times. Would you just please go do it? And so I did. Yeah. He's basically like, just shut up and do it already, Brooke. So I go in and I get deep into this meditation, and all of a sudden this 2024 Brooke is standing behind 2022 Brooke, who's standing behind 2016 Brooke, and 2024 Brooke gives 2022 Brooke a hug and says, it's not your fault. Oof. That's the first time in all of this journey that I feel I've ever really truly forgiven myself, because we were in the car on the road, that day for me. And
yeah.
I
think should be the next episode that we talk about that.
Well, we started to talk about the trial. Here we are. We haven't talked about
no, this is all
right?
all part of it, because again, there's the trial, which is the legal proceeding, and then the trial, as in like the tribulation, the challenge of the trial.
I promise, guys, at some point I will detail out what happened during the trial.
Yeah, I mean, this is good, but I understand what you're saying. I understand. I mean, this is the trial, right? The trial of life. Of life. And we're specifically talking about, I mean, we could talk about legal procedures as if we were lawyers and use correct jargon about blah, 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 and forensics and all these fancy words. But that's not really what the podcast is about. We're talking about the fallout of all of this, and we layered the grief, and then on top of that, the stress of a trial about your grief.
Yep. And
we didn't even mention the fact that this was on news articles and news stations for years. I mean, we're talking about this was getting national attention, and you were getting bombarded with reporters the minute you walk out of a courtroom with, why do you feel blah, 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 blah.
Well, I mean, I even just, they still reach out. I got something not that long ago, because Florida was going to the last stage of the hands-free bill, and so people are still reaching out to me. But that's the thing, people with the media, I get very cautious with them at this point, and not cautious with them in terms of anything to do with them, but I understand my own boundaries. And when the media just comes to me because it's important in that moment, I have to allow myself now to say, well, I feel it out, but I allow myself to set a boundary and say no for self-preservation for me. Where before, people were coming left and right, and I'm going, sure, we'll do it. And which was adding to, because I didn't know how to say no. I felt guilty. I felt like I was letting Logan down if I didn't talk about it, or, if I didn't go do this. And that's where that's changed too. I'm not doing this out of feeling guilty anymore. Like, this podcast isn't because I feel guilty and that I need to do something for Logan. I feel like my experiences have led me to this point where now is the time. Like, now I'm in the place where I can share, where I mean, it'll help me heal, but other people, can benefit from someone talking about it too. Yeah. And, that's why earlier when I'm saying you don't have to let the grief define your life, and you don't have to feel like you need to be stuck in that grief, for the rest of your life. You can evolve, and that is okay. Yeah. That's something that I don't think anybody, our society doesn't want us to, but then they'll only give you 3 days for bereavement off of work. So,
but that is what I'm talking about though. See, like, we did talk about the trial because these are all of the things that you had to like now face and paddle through, back to that analogy, because of the trial. If there was this whole other aspect that got opened up because of the fact that this event became the main source of stress for the next 9 years of your life, on top of the grieving, on top of losing your son.
Yeah.
We're not even talking about like you lost your son. There's people who lose their like loved one and then they don't have to go to court for it for 10 years. And there are people who do, you know, there's other people who are in your exact same boat, right? Or very, very similar boat where they lost someone and now they're like trying to figure out and get justice for what has happened to them. They also exist and they're dealing exactly with this and trying to navigate this insane ocean of complexity and emotional toll. And so you talking about it is, in my opinion, yes, you did talk about the trial. I think for the last few minutes, I think it'd be great to get your thoughts on or have you share a little bit about when towards the end of the trial as it was closing. And we can get back into the details even in another episode. We can do a part 3 of this later on, but I'm curious to see as it's starting to end. There's even online people go literally go find that there's a YouTube video, I think, of Tampa News or something. They're reading out, or they're showing Andriotis reading like an apology or something like that before he gets sentenced. And then there's the sentencing. Can you walk me through that day to kind of just put a bow on the trial, at least for now, that we can come back and revisit later? But like, what were you thinking? How are you feeling during all of this as it's kind of quote unquote coming to an end? And I put that in quotations because of course we know that there was an appellate hearing later. But
there's never an end. So here's, in all of the work that I've done, I have my personal belief system. The way I choose to move forward is by believing or understanding the ego versus your spiritual self. And I feel like your spiritual self is what is connected. You know, it's those whispers that you hear, kind of like what this was, right? This was a whisper. And, you know, in accordance to starting this podcast. And then my ego would come in and go, no, you've tried other things. You're going to fail at this. I mean, my ego was going, you're going to fail. You're going to fail. While my spiritual side is just going, let go of the ego, shut it up, and just let it be. Listen, you know, just be quiet and listen. And I say that because I want to tell the story real quick because it's going to lead up into how I felt the day of sentencing. So remember that Andriotis' attorney came to us just a few days before the trial started and wanted to plea with 1 year in prison and 2 years of probation.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe it.
And I remember it. I mean, Jordan and I were trying to get Mila out of the door to get her to preschool. And then we had an intensive with my then therapist. We were doing a couples intensive to prepare us for the trial. And I remember, the assistant state attorney, Lori, had called and she was like, I need to take this answer back to the judge. I need your answer. And I know both her and the judge were really interested in us doing and taking the plea. Not because they believed that that was the right thing, but they had watched what we had been through over all of these years and what it had done to us. And they were afraid that if we didn't take it and then he got a no, or he got excused, the jury, you know, went his direction, that it would break us again. So I appreciated all of that.
Self-preservation kind of thing.
But I mean, I tell you what.
She wanted you to protect yourselves for
because they had known that I had, you know, been suicidal before, that it had knocked me into, you know, being suicidal, and that Jordan and I had both been to Milestones. They knew all of this, but something in my gut said, it didn't feel right to do that. And so, you know, we dropped Mila off at daycare and we're headed over to Austin's and our therapist. And I'm like, Jordan, it doesn't feel right, because not only, you know, if we were to take the plea, then he doesn't get to go and listen to everybody's account, not just our account of the day of the crash and what it did for us or did to us, and ultimately for us, but also the people who were involved. You know, the EMTs, the other people in the crash that saw Logan and Mallory. I mean, all of these witnesses.
Larry. Yeah,
Larry.
People
I
like
mean,
that, yeah.
they deserve a voice in this too. And honestly, I was feeling like if he sat down and heard all of these accounts, that would be worse punishment than him spending time in prison. And I told him, I was like, let's go talk with this, with Austin. And Jordan was kind of on the fence of, well, if he spends a little bit more time than a year in jail, then maybe that would be okay. And I'm like, I'm not feeling it. And Jordan was very open to listening to me, which was phenomenal, because we get to Austin and, Lori's waiting for a phone call to tell the judge. They had allowed us time to go to that therapy session and to talk it out with the therapist. And she had been talking to Austin throughout, all the trial stuff or the lead up. And Austin puts this massive sticky note on the wall. I mean, it's huge, right? And he divides it in half and he lists one side with column A and one side with column B. And column A is the reason that we should go to trial, and column B is the reason that we should
take the plea.
So both sides have a long list of why we should, why we shouldn't. And ultimately, Jordan and I agreed that we needed to let go of the control. So let go of all of the control. It's not in our control. We need to let it play out the way it's supposed to, which is a lot. That's very hard for us to do, knowing we could be walking into this situation and Andriotis could go home. And then all of the fight that we had been through, everything we've been through,
the fallout
would have been nothing. Yeah. So we get into the trial, and I remember very early on, being a typographer, I'm always doodling, and on a Kleenex, I lettered out column A, because column A became the thing. In fact, I've got it tattooed now to remind myself all of the time. Column A is one of the first tattoos.
That's cold.
I got on my sleeve, but
cool.
I lettered it out, and it's right. It's actually right. It's worked in right in with the Phoenix. So column, you can't really see it, but column A is here, and then I've got the Phoenix. So it's all tied together. But so I write this out because we're all just this big ball of nerves and jitters and anxiety. And I said, you know what? Just remember the column A. I told Lori, because I had told her this story. I was like, we're going column A. Remember the column A. So she keeps the Kleenex on her desk the whole time. There was one point where the defense had asked for the trial to be dismissed. And I swear to you, all of us thought that the judge was going to agree to it. I mean, he talked for like 10 minutes, and that whole 10 minutes, we're just sitting in our seats and we're just, pucker power with our, bottom sides. And we're just like, oh my God, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. And then he said at the very end, we're going to leave this up to the jury. So we're still like, okay, column A, right? We're still living column A. The very last day of the trial, when everybody had finished all of their comments, and the jury, goes to deliberate, we, Jordan and myself, and because the girls were at home, or were back at home in Tennessee, my mom had come to watch them. And so it was just Jordan and myself at the trial, but our dear friends, Kristen and Denise, were there with us. And we had walked and we had gone to get Mexican, and we had just sat down, and, we were talking about guacamole. Denise has a fascination with guacamole. So we were talking about that and ordered our meal. And it was, I think, about an hour and a half after we had closed, and Lori called and she said, get over here. The jury's back. And so we're like, oh my God, is an hour a good sign? Is it a bad sign? And nobody thought that anything was going to come of this. Remember, the judge and Lori both were, encouraging us to take this plea deal because they didn't want him to walk away and then us crash again. Yep. We go in and they convict him of all counts. Of every single count, the jury had convicted him. It didn't even take an hour. They knew, they had known. And column A, in fact, Mallory made a sign over here. I'll bring it up or a painting. She did a painting that I've got in my office that I always look at. Column A. Column A has been the way that I have chosen to live my life now, because column A was, I let go of all of the control and I let happen what was supposed to happen. Like, I've lived my life in control. I mean, all of these years, even all of those years after Logan died, through the civil case, through all of the criminal case, I thought I could control. I thought I had the ultimate say. But at the end of the day, everything that has happened the way it was supposed to. Now, it's hard for a bereaved mom to say your child was supposed to die, right? But I believe in the bigger purpose that we just don't know. We can't control how these, and that understanding that I don't have the control, letting go of the control, has also allowed me to let go of the guilt with the grief. So now I don't really grieve. I mourn, but I also understand that there's something much bigger than myself and I am not in control. So column A is how I choose to live my life now. Because for Jordan and I to just completely let go and let be what's going to happen. I mean, especially for the two of us who are very controlling, need to be in control, very type A, very, we're going to decide. We let it all just play out, and it was hard for us not to just plea. And because it still meant we had to go back down to Florida. I mean, we left for Florida on our wedding anniversary because the trial started the next day. So we, ended up leaving for Florida on April 23rd. The trial starts April 24th. We didn't take the plea, which means we had to go to trial because remember, if I didn't testify, there would be no trial. So we just let all of this column A happen. Column A from Austin's office, the reasons why we should go to trial. And it is all just kind of unfolded into this sometimes dark, but overall beautiful step forward, and again, I don't want people to feel like I'm callous or like I wish my son was dead, because I don't. I'd give it up in a heartbeat, but I can't control what happened. The best I can do is find my way forward in it. But for me, that's letting go of the control and understanding that there is a life to live, and just by seeing how all of these things fell into place, they all fell into place out of my control. So that gives me the ability to, to listen, like to your story of the soccer. Logan loved soccer. I was getting all teary choked up when you were telling that story, because what you don't know during all of this, column A type of experience you're having this week or this past weekend, Logan loved soccer. He was terrible. Logan was awful at soccer. But God loved the boy. He was so passionate about it, and he worked his ass off, and he was like the team coach, really. Get in, and he was like telling everybody good job, and I mean, he just was phenomenal in that team and on that field, and they were all together for long-standing seasons. But man, he'd get out there and he was terrible. He was so bad. God love him. He was just so bad. But the very last game of not only the season, but of his life, he scored his first and only goal.
Let's go.
He did. I mean, and I've got video of his coach giving him, talking about how he was going to cry because Logan it was the last one. So he was giving out the medals and stuff. And he was talking about how Logan, made
what a champ,
made the goal. And I like jumped up from my seat and ran out on the field just because, I wasn't even thinking. I was so excited for him because he finally made a goal. But that's like one of those gifts left behind that I can look back at and smile. And then you bring this up about your weekend and the soccer, and it all just kind of, it's all the column A in me. That's how I view it. I view it as all of these beautiful instances that if we just let go and we listen and we see the things in front of us, nothing is ever really a coincidence. It's just, I feel like they're ways of us being guided. It's the universe way
of maintaining anonymous. That's what I got told about coincidences.
That's right.
All right. You know what? That is a perfect bow on this one.
Uh-huh.
Okay. We'll wrap this one up here. Thank you
Yeah,
so much,
sorry, I
Brooke.
talked a lot.
No, it's good. It was
I
great.
always-
It was a
I
great
always
conversation.
talk
I always
a
love
lot.
these. I love these. Thank you so much for the inspiration.
No.
This
Thank
has
you.
been the Trauma Uncensored podcast. My name is Andres Gamboa, and Brooke Scherer is alongside with me. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to the newsletter to find out when new episodes drop. If you forget, they're every Monday, but if you want reminders, that's where it'll be. Opt into anything you want to. Opt out of everything you don't. Check us out on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We're everywhere. Find us there. Thank you so much for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.